Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Bears Pod with Parker Hurley. I'm your host, Parker Hurley. It is Tuesday, 6 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Central. We're here every Tuesday and Thursday, 6 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Central, to discuss the Chicago Bears. We're getting closer to the off-season time, but we're going to keep talking about some draft talk. The Chicago Bears were just at their rookie mini camps. They're going to come back for OTAs in a couple weeks, so we're going to be discussing that. And as always, leave some comments in the comments section, and anything you guys want to talk about is what we're going to talk about. And as always, if you're not listening live, still leave some comments on the YouTube channel. We'll definitely hit those comments first thing on the next episode. But nonetheless, we're going to get right into it with some more Chicago Bears talk. We got I Am Skokes in the house. We got some commenters. Like I said, leave some comments. You guys always control the chat and like, subscribe, everything like that. Share to your friends. We're talking Chicago Bears. And we've got a couple things on the agenda, some rookie minicamp takeaways, and then we're going to dig a little bit deeper into Darnell Wright. First off, my three biggest takeaways from rookie minicamps. It's at least a valuable piece of information because the younger players, it's really their first checkpoint in terms of, when we look back on, from training camp to the end of the season to, the beginning of the season, middle of the season, all those expectations will be built off of right now and what they're doing right now. And also they get to talk to the media. The coaches get to talk to the media. We get to see some of the things that are going to start to happen here when the rookies, the veterans were in there before the draft. The rookies come in after the draft, and it's like the first and second year players are in there after the draft, and then they all come together for the big OTAs. The first takeaway I had actually was more along the lines of something that the coaches talked about and something that the media was coming away talking about, and something that we talked about last episode was, why did the Chicago Bears, go through the entire draft without taking a center? Was it something that they're going to possibly regret? And one of the big things was that, and I said, maybe they think Lucas Patrick, they feel a lot better about him as not only depth, but the potential long-term solution if they do have to call on him for depth. Beyond that, the coaching staff, and because a younger guy like Doug Kramer was able to attend this mini camp, they were talking about Doug Kramer even and saying that this was a 7th round pick last season. He basically, you could say he was awful in his first game of training camp, but I think five snaps into his career in the preseason, he got injured. And so here he is in his second season, and a lot of people would look at it and say, okay, Doug Kramer, a 7th round pick, got injured, basically just, you took a shot, you had, and hey, throw him to the scrap heap and draft another one. They're kind of looking at it and saying, well, if he didn't get injured, we think he would be in line to potentially be starting this season. And we're still very excited about him, and the fact that we have Whitehair sliding over his protection. We have Lucas Patrick, who last season we thought was going to be the starter. And as I said in the last episode, he's still only going to be 26 years old. So you say, well, as bad as Patrick was last season, most of Patrick's play, almost all of Patrick's play, was at guard last season. So maybe if he's at center, he's going to be a little bit better. And maybe, like I said, he's still 26, so there's still a lot of good play ahead of him. So they're saying that, and they also mentioned Dieter Iselin, who has been with here since the Ryan Pace days, not Ryan Poles, Ryan Pace. And Pace drafted him, but they were playing him at guard. And just last season, because Kramer goes down, because they didn't have Whitehair over there, because they're starting Mustipher and didn't really have a backup, they had to move Dieter over to be the backup center. And now they're saying, okay, he's still got something as a backup center. And a lot of people are saying this is a 3rd or 4th year UDFA. He barely makes the roster every single season, and mostly as a practice squad player. They're saying this is still his 2nd year at center, and we still see potentially coming up the training camp that he'll be better. Doug Kramer, 2nd year at center, we think he'll potentially be better. Lucas Patrick, 2nd year, and he's still 26 years old. So while they say Cody Whitehair, and while I agree, and while my big fear was Cody Whitehair is a short-term, isn't the long-term replacement, they're saying that between Patrick, and not only Patrick, but Kramer and Dieter Iselin, that they see something still moving forward. So we'll see about that. Like I said, I mean, it's still, Patrick was, basically a journeyman. And, while he's still 26, he got hurt. And, he hasn't shown, even when he was kind of just a fill-in starter for the most part. Doug Kramer, 7th round pick, Dieter Iselin, UDFA in his 4th season. I mean, the Chicago Bears think highly of them. We're going to see, So that's the first big takeaway I had from rookie minicamp. The second big takeaway is Tyler Scott is playing the slot. Tyler Scott in the slot is going to be an interesting thing, especially as we see into OTAs in training camp. Or is Tyler Scott a full-time slot player, or is this something that he's learning to do? Because in college, he was 97% outside. He never played the slot in college. It was like 20-something snaps over 3 seasons. And even, in those situations, he could be in the slot formation, but still be like the further outside receiver. So Tyler Scott didn't play the slot for Cincinnati whatsoever. So are they moving him into the slot because they want him to be more versatile, and they want, as the number 4 receiver, whoever goes down, they want him to be able to fill in for all those spots? Or are they putting him into the slot because last season Darnell Mooney went from like a part-time slot player, a very rare slot player, to the Chicago Bears primary slot player? And I mentioned that's so notable because they were putting him in the slot when, guys like Dante Pettis and Equinemius St. Brown were on the outside. So they were really like pushing him into the slot. They didn't need him to be that slot receiver. But now that they have DJ Moore and Chase Claypool, it's very obvious that Darnell Mooney is going to be the slot receiver next season. For more, he played 60% of the slot snaps last season, and they really, they almost needed him on the outside a little bit more because they didn't have Moore and Claypool. So now he's going to be in the slot more. And so my thought is, if Tyler Scott is in the slot because they want him to be able to play all 3 positions, fine, fair enough, whatever. If he's in the slot full time from OTAs to training camp throughout the season, we're getting pretty obvious that they're not going to re-sign Darnell Mooney, and Darnell Mooney's going to be gone. And I think if I had to make a statement right now, I think it would be that neither. I think a lot of people are saying, oh, one of Mooney or Claypool will earn a contract. I'm going to say that neither one will earn a contract with the Chicago Bears. I think the Bears are going to say that we're paying for DJ Moore. We have Tyler Scott coming up the heap, and I think they're going to draft one. So, I think they could see both of those two be gone. And I think the fact that they're prototyping Tyler Scott into the slot, it seems like, he already had similar physical attributes and a similar skill set to Mooney. And now that they're moving him into the slot, it seems almost, it seems like they're very much pushing him to be the long-term Darnell Mooney replacement. So then my last takeaway is that Tevin Jenkins, we thought so. We weren't sure about it. They're moving him to left guard. He was right guard last season. They signed Nate Davis. He was a right guard. The one thing you could say is that they tried to sign Ben Powers first, and Ben Powers was a left guard, and they got into a bidding war with the Denver Broncos and lost that bidding war. And so their next best guard was a right guard. It just so happened to be that way. They weren't going to sign a worse left guard because he just so happened to be a left guard, but they're moving Tevin Jenkins to left guard. And I'm saying that it was this time last year, Tevin Jenkins was a left tackle in rookie OTAs and those things. And then he shows up to training camp and he fails at right tackle. And then by the start of the season, he's at right guard. And now he's at left guard. And he's another Ryan Poles player, to where I'm looking at it and saying that it seems like no matter what Tevin Jenkins does, he's not going to win this coaching staff or this front office over. And he's basically, fill in to where we need you to fill in, and, be that guy until, you're gone, sort of thing. So I think Tevin Jenkins and Darnell Mooney, if you're expecting them to get contract extensions this offseason, I would say that the vibe out of rookie OTAs is that this will be Darnell Mooney's last season. Tevin Jenkins actually has 2 more seasons, but the fact that they don't really care to, progress him in any one position, or they seem to be willing to move him off of any position no matter what. I don't know if they're 100% committed to Tevin Jenkins long term either. But the offensive line is set now in terms of Braxton Jones at left tackle, Tevin Jenkins at left guard, Cody Whitehair is at center. And then, like I said, between Lucas Patrick, Doug Kramer, and Dieter Eiselen, they feel like they have enough depth there. And then Nate Davis and Darnell Wright. And that will get us into the next portion of the talk. Here is going to be some Darnell Wright talk. But like I always say, comment in the comment section. We will hit whatever you want to talk about immediately. And if you're watching after the show, leave a comment in the YouTube chat. We'll comment that first thing on the next show. And as always, follow me at ParkerHurley. Follow us at beargoggleson.com. Like I said, the Darnell Wright talk is going to be interesting. And the first thought, it is just like a funny thing that I just want to mention, is that it's just crazy that because we talked so much about Broderick Jones and the fact that, do you need to take that, left tackle that future left tackle. You only get so many chances at a left tackle, all that discussion. And here we go. We got DJ saying his favorite from the draft class. We'll hold up on the Darnell Wright talk with his favorites from the draft class are Roschon Johnson and Terrell Smith. And I mean, how can't you like the Roschon Johnson pick, especially because, as I mentioned, they were actually able to trade down. They had the number one pick in the 4th round, and probably Roschon was their number one player by that point, and they were able to trade down and still get Roschon Johnson. And then Terrell Smith, I think, is a really interesting one because he fits everything that, and the thing with Roschon Johnson is that he checks the pass protection boxes and the fact that he's going to steal the touchdowns and the power snaps that Khalil Herbert doesn't. I think he's going to be, on the field immediately. And I actually have a film review at beargoggleson.com. If you check it out, Bear Goggles On film review of Roschon Johnson. I actually highlight how Texas was creative in getting Roschon Johnson on the field as a fullback almost because, obviously Bijan Robinson is there. And so they're almost in a sidecar next to each other, Roschon and Bijan, and Roschon hits the hole first. And he's, everyone says he's a great pass blocker. He's actually a really good run blocker. And now he's clearing the way for Bijan, and Bijan's hitting these big holes. Maybe that's Khalil Herbert. But then what they were doing off of that is that, okay, now we fake the toss to Khalil Herbert. All the linebackers go to Khalil Herbert, and right up the gut from the fullback position goes Roschon Johnson bursting up the gut after all the linebackers clear out of the box because they're all following Bijan, or potentially in this case, it would be Herbert. So I really like Roschon Johnson. And like I said, I think what's cool is that you can get him on the field. And yeah, no problem, DJ. Definitely leave some more comments if you want to dictate where we're going. But check out that film review on Roschon Johnson because it highlights more in depth how they used him as almost a fullback. And it was, like I said, they were able to use the running back to then create rushing yards for the fullback because a fullback dive is one thing. A fullback dive is another thing when it's Roschon Johnson, So and the Terrell Smith pick, obviously, I talked about was height, length, speed, and that's what Ryan Poles, we talked about it from the fact that he passed on Peter Skoronski. He passed on a center like Luke Whippler. He takes guys that fit the prototype of height, length, speed. The interesting thing with Terrell Smith is that he actually got benched in the COVID season was obviously awkward. And then, but he got benched in 2019. The COVID season was weird. And then in 2021, he started to earn his job back. And then in 2022, he was a starter from day one, earned the job, was a breakout candidate. You wonder, was he a one-year wonder? But that 2022 video, basically he was an undrafted player. And then from how good he was in 2022, shot him up to the 5th round even. So it's going to be really interesting because the question is, was he a one-year wonder who got drafted or is he really starting to ascend here? Did the light bulb flip during that COVID offseason, things of that nature. So, those are two really interesting picks. And I'm actually going to have a podcast where I think I'm going to break down more in depth each player. And we're going to talk about Darnell Wright probably today. So, like I said, just the funny thought is that because it was such a thought of, is Broderick Jones the pick at 9? Is Broderick Jones the pick at 9? And then the Pittsburgh Steelers of all teams, trade up and get Broderick Jones. And it is just how reminiscent of Chicago Bears fans talking themselves into George Pickens is the obvious player at number 40, whatever, when they took Kyler Gordon. George Pickens is the obvious player. The Chicago Bears obviously do not take George Pickens. The Pittsburgh Steelers take the Georgia's, player who everyone thought was the best player available, who was a huge position of need, all of those things, just like Broderick Jones, a lot of people potentially could say that. So it's going to be interesting, just like we compare Kyler Gordon and just like and then the after effects of he passes on George Pickens and then he needs a wide receiver. The Steelers take George Pickens and they say, Chase Claypool, we don't need you. And then he trades for Chase Claypool. And guess what? The Chase Claypool draft pick turns into Joey Porter Jr. And now you're going to have to debate, is Joey Porter Jr., is he going to be a better cornerback than Kyler Gordon? Because you said, oh, well, they needed a cornerback in that spot. But if they take George Pickens, do they still get Joey Porter Jr.? And so all of a sudden the Steelers they're very tied because the Bears only have Chase Claypool because they passed on Pickens, and the Steelers only traded Chase Claypool because they have George Pickens. And now the Bears, passed on Pickens for Kyler Gordon, and the pick that the Steelers got for Claypool turned into Joey Porter. It's 2 wide receivers, 2 cornerbacks, and then it just so happens that the Chicago Bears take a right tackle at number 9, and everyone's going to debate, should you have taken a right tackle, or should you have trusted Braxton Jones, or should you have taken, the kid from Georgia who's a little bit younger, who's maybe a little bit more raw, but a lot of people thought that he was, had the higher ceiling in Broderick Jones, and now he's going to go to the Steelers. So now all of a sudden it does become, and it's really fair that you could basically say in this alternate reality, the Chicago Bears could have had George Pickens, Joey Porter Jr., and Broderick Jones, and now they're all in the Steelers, and the Chicago Bears could have very easily had, or the Steelers, could have been, but instead of that, they have Kyler Gordon instead of Joey Porter, Chase Claypool instead of George Pickens, and Darnell Wright instead of Broderick Jones. And people will say the jury's out on both, but it's going to be interesting to see because Kyler Gordon, struggled during his rookie season, and they brought in a couple cornerbacks like Terrell Smith. So that's going to be interesting just to compare. It's gonna be Darnell Wright versus Broderick Jones, and Broderick's a little bit younger, a little bit more raw, a little bit more upside. Darnell Wright is clearly the better pass protector. Broderick Jones clearly the better run blocker. And the one thing I do want to touch on is that while I do understand the debate about right tackle versus left tackle in the top 10, and while like I said, it's gonna come down to if Braxton Jones, all of a sudden it's, that rookie season was a mirage, and all of a sudden the Steelers have the best left tackle of the next 10 years, we're going to be talking about this for a long time to come. But I don't think you can just say, and people are just sometimes just saying, the Bears backed themselves into a hole where they were forced to take a right tackle. You shouldn't take a right tackle in the top 10. Right tackles don't go top 10 in the NFL draft. I will push back on that a little bit because actually, when you look at it since 2011, there have been 15 tackles drafted in the top 10. 10 of them have been left tackles, but that means that 5 of them have been right tackles. And so obviously, yes, it is fair that the left tackles tend to get more money, tend to get drafted a little bit higher, things of that nature. So that is the argument for Broderick Jones, or one of them. You could make that case, but the 5 right tackles who were drafted in the top 10 since 2011, you have Lane Johnson, Jack Conklin, Mike McGlinchey, Penei Sewell, and Evan Neal. I mean, you could talk about, say what you want. Those are serious hits. Lane Johnson is, he's a staple of the Eagles franchise and has been the staple of the Eagles franchise for a decade now. I mean, and I'm not even saying that the Chicago Bears just drafted that, but the idea of you can't draft a right tackle in the top 10 when the Philadelphia Eagles, the team that we're all supposed to be copying, the model franchise, everyone loves the Eagles, they drafted a right tackle 4th overall, and they never moved him over, and he's still to this day their right tackle. And you can see the Eagles have drastic on-off splits because right tackle is that valuable. It's just not that big of a deal that you can't. It's left tackle isn't that much more important. Jack Conklin made an All-Pro during his rookie season, and then the first year he signs a big deal with the Browns, and then the first year he gets with the Browns, he makes an All-Pro. So we're talking about a 2-time All-Pro in terms of Jack Conklin, and an obvious hit. Mike McGlinchey is probably the most disappointing of the 5 and just signed for $20 million. And people are saying that what the Chicago Bears should have done is, instead of signing Tremaine Edmonds, you should sign Mike McGlinchey and then draft Broderick Jones. But I mean, there's a real chance that Darnell Wright is going to be better than Mike McGlinchey, and he's younger, and he's not making anything. He's making like $4 million a year, where Mike McGlinchey's making like $20 million a year. And it goes back to show you, Mike McGlinchey's, it's like $18 million per year, $19 million is what McGlinchey's making. Jawan Taylor's making $20 million per year to play for the Kansas City Chiefs. And everybody thought, okay, they're paying him left tackle money. They're paying him to replace Orlando Brown Jr. No, they signed Donovan Smith from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Donovan Smith is going to make $7 million to play left tackle. Meanwhile, the Kansas City Chiefs are going to pay somebody $20 million to play right tackle. So, I mean, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Philadelphia Eagles, the 49ers drafted Mike McGlinchey in the top 10. Are these bad teams that I'm listing off here? Are these teams making stupid decisions by drafting a right tackle in the top 10? So that's an easy way of looking at it. And like I said, even if Mike McGlinchey isn't a big hit, he made $20 million on an open market. In the 49ers, that helps them potentially getting a third round pick in terms of value in the compensatory formula. And I talked about the Chicago Bears would be insane to draft Bijan Robinson because Saquon Barkley was in the same draft as Mike McGlinchey, and Saquon Barkley is making $10 million, and Mike McGlinchey is making $18 million, and Saquon Barkley is one of the 5 best players in his position, and Mike McGlinchey is not one of the top 5, maybe a top 10 right tackle, maybe. And he's still making $18 million. And Saquon is the best running back in the NFL potentially, but the best running back in the NFL is only going to make like 12. So even like you have to take that, even if Darnell Wright isn't a top 10 right tackle, he's still better than the best running back in the NFL just based on money. And then you look at Penei Sewell. I mean, has he been one of the reasons that the Detroit Lions have turned their, franchise around? Has he been one of those cornerstone players? And, they drafted him to be a left tackle. Well, he's been a right tackle for the last 2 seasons, and it's changed their entire culture and offensive line. And then Evan Neal, who had an up and down season, was another one they drafted. He was left tackle because they have Andrew Thomas. He's on the right side, but he's not going to leave the right side of the field. So, and I mean, a lot of people think Evan Neal will be just fine. So, I mean, 4 out of 5 hits so far. Maybe Mike McGlinchey, because he made $18 million, you can't say he's not a hit. So 4 out of 5 hits, and Evan Neal is potentially going to be a hit. If those right tackles, when they're good enough to go in the top 10, they're usually pretty freaking good. And that goes back to Darnell Wright, who, yeah, I mean, like I said, as much as you want to say, could he improve in the run blocking and things of that nature? As pristine as a pass blocker as you could possibly get. So it's just so hard to, get too dissuaded by, like I said, the fact that, they passed on a left tackle who went to the Pittsburgh Steelers and things like that. And the most interesting thought is, like I said, actually, that Evan Neal was pretty down last season, and you can't really write him out. Lane Johnson's worst season of his career was his rookie season. He allowed 11 pressures. If you look at Lane Johnson's, the pressures he allowed, the struggles he had in pass protections, the penalties that he committed, he had a worse rookie season than Braxton Jones did last season. And so if you're looking at Darnell Wright through the lens of, if he struggles out the gate next season and things start slow, to me, based on the fact that you look at some of these right tackles and you say between Evan Neal started out slow, even Penei Sewell had a few weeks, by the end of his rookie season, I think he found his stride, but Lane Johnson started slow. Evan Neal started slow. Penei Sewell was a little slow out the gate. You look at these historical comparisons and you're going to say that, and when you get an average of their 5 seasons, the pressures allowed, the snaps allowed, the pass block win rate, all of those things, it actually, if Darnell Wright has a similar season to Braxton Jones on the right side last season, it's actually not going to be that bad, because when you look at some of these guys, Braxton Jones had a better rookie season than Lane Johnson, and he was right in a similar vein as guys like Mike McGlinchey. And so then there's like I said, Jack Conklin made an All-Pro during his rookie season, and if Darnell Wright does that, obviously that's going to be a good thing. But yeah, so I think that no matter what, if Darnell Wright, and because he's such a good pass protector, I can't see him necessarily struggling out the gate. But if some of those things with run blocking, like I talked about, do come up, I just can't judge him after one season, knowing that historically these top 10 right tackles always seem to pan out and always seem to have a not as great of a rookie season. And here's DJ. He says, I think that Jalen Johnson will break out in 2023? I think he's overdue to hit his stride. I definitely do. And he is one of those players that where a lot of people are saying, does this Tyreek Stevenson and drafting Terrell Smith, does that mean that Jalen Johnson is out of here? I don't necessarily agree with that. I still think that maybe by training camp, or maybe there's going to be a time in training camp where the Chicago Bears iron out an extension. I think drafting all those cornerbacks is, one, you can never have too much depth at cornerback. 2, Ryan Poles sticks to best player available. 3, I think you're going to see here that Kyler Gordon was playing outside and the slot last season, and maybe that was a little bit too much, and maybe you're going to see him as a full-time slot player. So maybe you're going to see Tyreek outside full-time, Jalen outside full-time, and Kyler inside full-time. And then Terrell Smith is your number 4 guy who can play all those positions. So I don't see them drafting those guys as they're not going to extend Jalen Johnson. And it still comes back to the idea of, when you look at the Matt Eberflus scheme, Jalen Johnson is still a perfect fit. the press techniques, the tackling ability, the physicality, and the zone instincts. The biggest questions that Jalen Johnson has is zone coverage, some of the in-breaking routes, some of the double moves, things like that. But when he's able to press, back off, play zone, keep his eyes on the quarterback, I think he's really good. And I think that there was that weird time at the very beginning, like it was probably like this time last year when he like missed the day of OTAs and like for one day he was like the number 2 cornerback and people freaked out. But I mean, I think you could talk about, okay, in a different scheme, changing things up. Maybe he was up behind a little bit in OTAs, slowly caught up. I think the scheme's a perfect fit for him. I still think he's a really talented player. And everybody's excusing it for Kyler Gordon, obviously. The pass rush. If they had a better pass rush, he maybe would have had a better rookie season. Obviously, the same thing could be said for Jalen Johnson, and it is fair, how much did the Bears get better in their pass rush? But I think when we talked about it, I think last episode, that as much as you want to say those edge rushers didn't get, substantially better, they are still better than, towards the end of last season. And the fact that they were able to get so much better on the interior, that it's just so hard to say that, the Bears defense should just be significantly better because of the pass rush. And that should really help a guy like Jalen Johnson's role. And yeah, it should be. I mean, even last year, one of the worst games that Jalen Johnson had was, I want to say it was the Lions, because he probably had to go against St. Brown in the slot and just got cooked in the slot because he's not a slot cornerback. He is one of those, and do you knock him because of that? He sticks to his side. He's a one side zone cornerback. He can press and he can play. But when you ask him to be a man cornerback, and when you ask him to follow guys all over the field, including into the slot, he's just not that guy. And that's where the contract negotiations will be interesting, because he's not going to get paid like a number 1. He's a high-end number 2 or a low-end number 1. And it is, where does that specific money come into play? But I think Ryan Poles, the way that he drafts cornerbacks, I don't think it's saying that we're going to replace Jalen Johnson. I think it's saying that we realize how valuable and we realize how quickly you can run out of guys in that back end. So I still think Jalen Johnson is in the Chicago Bears long-term plan. So we got like 3 minutes left here. If you got any comments for us to finish up the show, or follow me at beargoggleson.com, or if you're watching on YouTube after the show, leave some comments. And yeah, really just, I was going to talk a little more about Darnell Wright. Some of the things are the Bears want him to lose some weight. They didn't talk about how much they want him to lose. And I do think it comes back to, they want him to be a better mover as a run blocker. In an article that I have on beargoggleson.com is a film review of Darnell Wright. If you Google Parker Hurley's film review of Darnell Wright, you'll definitely see no problem, DJ, and definitely leave some comments again. We'll talk soon. But like I said with Darnell Wright, I think they want him to lose some weight, because I think that's the best way for him to improve as a run blocker, get out in space as a run blocker, be a second level run blocker. And there are little moments, and I think I highlighted a couple in that article, where you can see glimpses and flashes, and you can say, okay, maybe he's a pretty good run blocker. Maybe maybe he has moments, but there are too many moments where, the term lumbering, the term, just kind of slow-footed, balance issues, which is really surprising when you look at Darnell Wright, because when he's in pass protection, it's the balance issues are the exact opposite, and he looks so light on his feet. But when he's trying to go forward, and I do think some of it is, I think they want him to lose weight because they want him to be just a more fluid mover in run blocking. And we talked about how Braxton Jones, one of the big values they immediately got out of him. Yeah, he struggled in pass protection, but they immediately were able to get him at the second level and on the move in run blocking. I think you want to do that with Darnell Wright. And the big issue is that I think he leans too far, like over his chest, and at his weight, I think it tends to lead to balance issues for sure. And it is something I think they talked about it during his first OTAs. They said weight loss and run blocking, we need to get him more mobile in those things. And like I said, you can really see, and this is something that we're definitely going to be looking at, is when Darnell Wright starts to get on the move, is he still leaning over too much? Because when he gets that momentum and he's leaning over and his weight starts to take him, you're starting to go too far forward, and if you get any sort of push or any sort of pull from, I think it's like 41 from Alabama, you could see 41 from Alabama just grabs him and tosses him because he has no balance, and because he's just like he's plowing forward with basically his head down and his waist bent over, and it's just like he has no momentum. He has momentum going forward, but it's just you can throw him to the side, and then 41 cleans up and makes an easy tackle and things along those lines. And there was a play he's trying to pull, and okay, it's a tight space, but he trips over somebody's foot, and now he's sprawled out on the ground, and the run goes for nowhere, and things of that nature. So he is a top 10 pick, and he's a top 10 pick because, like I said, it's surprising to see the balance issues in run blocking, because the balance issues in pass protection are as impressive as it gets. But that's the big thing that we're going to take away from Darnell Wright. We're either going to talk about the corners, Tyreek and Terrell, or we'll talk about the edge rushers next time. We'll probably have some OTA takeaways as well. Tune in Thursday at 6 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Central. Leave some comments on YouTube. We'll hit them first thing next episode, and we'll talk to you guys later.